dude. Micro Brew episode number 3. Joined with me is the creator, the one, the only, Joe from the podcast Things Joe Hates. Thanks for popping on with me, man.
Hey, man, it's my pleasure. It's pretty cool. I get to follow the guy from the Showtime show.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Brian King, of course, was the last Micro Brew episode, and I need to continue to watch that show. Sometimes it's not the best show to have on in the background with my son around.
With your daughter?
Yeah,
oh, your
son and daughter. Yeah, my daughter.
Son, yeah, you have 2 young children. So,
mm-hmm.
That's the benefit. I have older kids. But yeah, that's impressive. You pulled a guy from from a show. That's a pretty good get.
Yeah, it was pretty fun. It was exciting, and I was glad to be able to do it. But yeah, I'm glad you were able to hop on here as well. You have your podcast, Things Joe Hates. Let's talk a little bit about that and how it came about. And I've been a weekly listener for quite some time now, and I really enjoy what you do.
I'm glad you enjoy it. Thank you very much. So it started at the job I had before I had this job. I was working in a development organization, and we hired this kid right out of college, and he was a developer, and he was a younger kid. Obviously, came right out of college, and I shouldn't say kid. I mean, he was a full-grown man by the time, right? I mean, he's 22, 23 years old, but I'm in my 40s at the time, and he notices that I have this propensity to say, I hate when this happens, or I hate that, I hate this. So I started, he said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start writing down whenever you hate something. And the next time I said I hated something, I heard him typing, and I said, are you actually writing that down? And his name was Zach, and he said, oh yeah, I'm writing it down. At the end of the year, he started in like July, and at the end of the year, he gave me a text file that had 73 items on it that I had hated during the course of the last 6 months of the year.
Wow.
So I was like, oh, it's pretty funny. So I shared it on Facebook, and people enjoyed it. And then about halfway through the next year, he actually found another position and moved on to a different company.
Okay.
And gave me the text file, and I kept a list of my own stuff, and eventually I said, why don't I just put this on Twitter? This seems like a better way to keep an active list of things. So I did. I opened up the Things Joe Hates Twitter account and started tweeting out all the archival hate that I had, and once I caught up, I just started tweeting my hate in real time. And that went on for a number of years, and last year I met Jake, and he has some media development experience, the podcast recording and all that stuff, as well as video and other kinds of things. But I said, hey, how hard is it for you to do a podcast? He goes, oh, it's very easy for him. So I said, I've got this concept of, I've got this Twitter account that you follow, and why not turn this into a podcast? So we actually sat down and recorded our first pilot episode, and it was garbage all around. It was just terrible. And I sent it to some of my friends, and one of the things I talked about hating in the pilot was I hate MySpace, right? And I called it the white trash capital.
Oh, MySpace.
Right. Yeah. Did you have a MySpace account?
I did. I don't anymore. It's been deleted for quite some time now, but yes, I did have the MySpace.
Right. I did too, and I hated it. Oh, hold on. Let me turn this. That was my phone. Let me turn my phone down. I hate when my phone goes bings when I'm in an interview. It's going to be one of the things I hate. Anyway, so some of the feedback I got was like, if you're going to talk about things you hate, make them timely. Don't talk about MySpace. Everybody hates MySpace, and nobody has an account there anymore.
Right.
So I had to, retool the idea a little bit, and I actually, for the Joe Rates Your Hate segment, every week I do 2 things. I talk about the things I hate, and then I try to do some listener engagement where I collect things that listeners hate. If it's on a topic, I try to collect it on the topic. And I did another pilot episode that had those 2 segments on it, and it was better. And then I actually had Andrea Petrilli, who does our female voiceover at the beginning of the show, actually had cut the promo, or cut the opening rather. So we put that on the 3rd pilot, and I don't think anybody ever heard the 3rd pilot. I think we just kept it to ourselves.
Okay.
And actually, the third pilot was actually a pretty good episode, so we're probably actually going to rehash it at some point in time. It was about waiting in line. It was terrible.
That's horrible.
Which is horrible. That's right.
I was gonna say it's funny because I have a little bit of a retail background, and I used to always hate it when people would complain about waiting in line because sometimes it happens. But now that I don't work in retail, I really hate waiting in line, and I'm like, I totally get it.
Yeah, I understand why everybody was complaining about it. The part I don't understand is when you're in retail, that's the part of the business where the customer is ready to hand you the money.
Right.
And you're making them wait to give you money. Never make the customer wait to give you money.
That's true.
Take the money.
That is true, man. But so I've been listening for quite some time, and we've interacted a little bit throughout Twitter. We've done some promo exchanges, and I like the fact that you involve the listening audience, your listeners, because it's pretty funny. It's engaging, and the things you pick, like how do you pick the topic of the week?
So, okay. When we were developing this podcast, one of the things I did was I went back through all of these lists that I have. So I actually have kept text files for every year. And I, believe it or not, I have a spreadsheet that tracks how many things I've hated during the course of the year. And actually this year I'm running way behind hate schedule, which is, I'm very low on hate.
The proper term, hate schedule.
Right.
I like it.
Yeah. So I actually took all of my hates and classified them into different categories, and some of them are not classifiable, so I can't really put things into a category. So I call that a grab bag. So of the usable list, probably about a third of it is grab bag material.
Nice.
And we've done 3 grab bag episodes before, which is just a random set of things I hate. And it's Jake says he likes doing those episodes because he finds them more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Or that the Rate Your Listener hate also is fantastic for those episodes because it can come from anywhere, right?
Right. I like the idea that you do. Like, I like the grab bags, but I like every week you seem to have something that is incredibly relatable, at least to me. And that's what I like about it. And it's you present it in a funny way, and you present it in a very clean way, which, you listen to my show. I'm a pretty big potty mouth and things like that. So I am impressed by your skills to keep everything clean. If a word slips out, you censor it. So I like it. Very family friendly.
We've had to bleep a couple of times. I had to bleep for the hate-filled rant of the year last year, because the person who actually wrote it put the F-bomb in it. So
okay.
I read it like that, and then Jake bleeped it out. And then a couple times Jake has dropped something. And, we want to keep it because I know that there are kids that listen to the show, friends of mine who let their kids listen to it. So we keep it kind of clean for that. Also, one of the big reasons I keep it clean is because of it's not because I don't make a habit of cussing. When the microphones are off, it's a different story, right?
Yeah.
But I think that profanity is the salt of comedy, right?
Okay.
If you don't have enough profanity in your comedy, it can be very bland unless it's very good, right?
Right.
And the topic that I'm talking about, things I hate, is already pretty salty, I think.
Right.
So I don't want it to be too salty. Like I think when I think of comedians who don't use a lot of profanity, I think of Jim Gaffigan, and I think he's probably the funniest guy that I've heard that doesn't use a lot of profanity. And then when I think of comedians that use a lot of profanity, I think people like Chris Rock, Mark Maron. I think he's very funny. But then when you get to people who use too much profanity, I just don't think that's funny. Like I really liked Eddie Murphy's. I'm going way back. I liked his stuff early on, but when he did Raw, I thought that was just profanity for profanity's sake, and I don't think that's funny. I think if it accents the joke, it's funny.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't, I just don't find use in it. So I try to stay away from it for that reason. I'm already talking about something that I might be enraged about, and I just don't think that profanity will add too much to it. Maybe sometime it will. I don't know, but I just.
No, I like it.
Yeah.
I like the way you do it. I'm a pretty big comedy nerd as well, so I follow a lot of comics and watch a lot of comics. I haven't watched too much of Jim Gaffigan's. He comes to Wisconsin quite a bit. His thing used to be every New Year's Eve, he's always performing in Milwaukee.
Huh.
But he doesn't do that. I don't know if he does that anymore, really. But yeah, that's pretty awesome that you do that. And I definitely see where you're coming from. I just swear all the time, and
right.
I just make it a thing. So I think the question.
I listen to your podcast every week as well, so it's not. I'm not saying I have an aversion to it, and pretty much all of the podcasts. Like I listen to Amanda's podcast, Lady Bitch.
Right. I've definitely censored myself and have edited things out in podcasts before that are even too much for me sometimes. So, yeah. I think the question that everyone wants to know is, what do you like?
What do I like? Well, I like a lot of things. I like. I can't complain about my job. I'm pretty happy with my job. So
that's good. That's a good thing.
I've actually said that on the podcast a couple of times that I don't really have anything I hate at my job right now. That's not always been the case.
Right.
You get one of the things I've always hated about places I've worked is that there's this almost like I want to say weasel mentality, but people stop giving you the information that you need when you probably need it the most. And I don't think that's happening where I am now. I don't know that it would happen. So I'm pretty happy with that. Of course,
awesome.
I'm very happy with my family. I love my wife and children. They're both all three of them. They're great people. They are.
So
older.
you got two kids then?
I do. I have a son and a daughter. My daughter is 21, and my son will be 19 later this month.
I can't. I'm definitely not ready for those ages for my kids ever.
It's great.
My daughter's 9 and my son is 4. So the 4-year-old he's wild. It's 9-day difference between my daughter and my son when they were at the same age, and it's crazy. But yeah, I wouldn't change them, and I think to the future all the time. And I was like, I know the things that I did when I was a teenager. And I definitely. And you're like, I don't want my kids doing it. Yeah, please don't do that stuff.
Don't do that. The only bit of advice I'll give you is I'll tell you this. Be honest with them. Say,
right.
This is what I did, and this is why it was such a terrible idea. It's what I've always done. For example, this is a prime example. I was talking about this with somebody today. I said, if you're going to go to college, you need to pick a major that is going to be valuable to somebody that wants to hire you when you come out. If you don't do that, then you will make the mistake I made when I went to college, and I majored in mass communication, right?
Me too. Yeah, radio, TV, film was my official title, major or whatever. Yeah.
And are you working in that field now?
I was, but no, I'm not.
Not now.
I'm not. No, correct.
Now, when you worked in that field, do you really think that you needed that degree to work in that field, or could you have just picked all that stuff up?
Yeah, that stuff can be taught pretty easily. Majority of the people that were in the building that I was in, we all went to pretty much the same college, but most of the people that were even on air didn't go to college for it.
Right. Because they just developed a talent or a skill and became good at it. They did it, and that's how you get good at something, is you do it.
And I definitely didn't need, I went to school for 5 years. I was working full time and going to school full time, and then my daughter had been born. I had my daughter when I was 18, so I had a lot of things going on, and I definitely didn't need to spend 5 years of my life to learn how to talk on the radio. Of course, you take a million other classes, and there's classes I definitely am happy that I took and I learned a lot about, and kind of opened my eyes towards different lenses and things like that. But yeah, the tens of thousands of dollars I now have to pay back, maybe not worth it.
Right. Yeah. So I majored in mass comm. I got out. I had a miserable sales career immediately after that. I couldn't get any jobs in media because I live in the Washington, Baltimore area. So I don't know where it is on the market list, but it's not a small market. So you can't just walk into that market.
Right. Yeah, I was lucky enough to have pretty local levels here in the city that I live in. But yeah, you really, to get into a bigger market, you have to have some experience, as they say, but they're not willing to give you that beginning experience, unfortunately.
You have to go to a small market to get that, and you have to find somebody who's willing to pay you to do it, or maybe they're not willing to pay you to do it, right?
Right.
And you just do it for free. But
I still do it for free.
Yeah, that's right. You have a show, right?
Yeah, I have the company I left. I was doing the morning show, and I was doing a million other things. So I was doing sales, which I hated. I just hated sales. I felt so. I don't know. I took no for an answer way too easily. They're just like, yeah, I can't afford it. I'm like, all right, cool, man. and then I was gone. I did some graphic stuff for them too, and I ran all the promotions. So setting everything up and contacting all the winners and everything like that. You'd be surprised of how much people complain about winning free stuff.
Yeah,
it's unreal. But yeah, I did a lot of that. I did many things there. But when I left, I still hung on to the one show, which is once a week. It's on Sunday nights from 7 to 8 p.m. I just record it at home and send it over. So it's still fun to do. But yeah, I don't get paid for it.
Right. And I think that's worthwhile if you enjoy doing it. I don't get paid to podcast, but I still do it because I kind of enjoy it.
Yeah, I pay to podcast actually.
Right, exactly. I have to pay the web hoster or the hosting service. You have to buy the microphones and the equipment.
Yeah. It's not necessarily cheap either.
No, it's not. The microphones I'm on are actually surprisingly inexpensive. They're condenser mics. But they have to run into a little tiny tube channel mixer box that's USB connected to the computer.
Exactly.
And that was like $120.
Yeah, for sure. The equipment wise, and you can always get, if you really, anyone ever wanted, you can get just the straight USB mics.
Right.
I like to run mine through a mixer as well, but yeah, it's it can get pretty expensive sometimes, but it's a fun hobby to do, and I really love it. And some people even pay to have their podcast reviewed. Or in my case, I didn't have to pay a dime. I just randomly had it reviewed. So that was exciting.
You were talking about that on your last episode. What's that guy's name?
Yeah.
I can't even remember his name.
Dave Jackson.
Dave Jackson. And I listened to his review of your podcast. And you know what? I didn't find it the least bit fair. He listened to about 3 minutes of your podcast and complained about you not talking about the beer you review, which... If you listen to your podcast on a weekly basis, you always do that at the beginning of the show.
Right.
But you also, before you do that, you talk to your guest and have them introduce themselves.
Yeah.
And you have some banter back and forth. I enjoy listening to your show, Drew.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
And the guy at the end of his show says, hey, if you want your show reviewed, you can hit me up on Fiverr. Yeah, I'm not paying you any money to review my show.
I didn't have to pay him, and I don't even know how he found it. I think he found it probably via some of the hashtags I must use, and yeah, and then it's all self-serving for him. But I did take some of his information to heart. I was just like, all right, and then I'm trying to do a little bit better with the audio processing and things like that. So I guess it wasn't a complete waste, but the point of his show, I don't really know.
Yeah, I don't know who he thinks he's adding value to when he randomly reviews a podcast. I mean, other than himself.
And doesn't tell him that he did it. Like, he didn't tell me that he did my show. I saw it on iTunes when I searched my name.
Right.
And
it just shows
that's how
up.
it popped out.
Yeah. Well, he hasn't reviewed my show, but he's more than welcome to review my show. It's called Things Joe Hates, but I'm not giving you $5, dude. That's just not happening.
You could do a whole episode on how you hate people who just prying other people's things to make a profit.
Right. I just want to be like the French guy in the Monty Python. Mind your own business.
I actually have never seen Monty Python.
Flying Circus, or the Search for the Holy Grail, or Holy.
I've never seen none of them.
It's all coming to Netflix.
Is it?
Yep.
I'll definitely have to check it out. That used to be a thing on the morning show. We did this segment. At first we called it Weekend Review, where I would like review something different. And it always ended up being like watching classic movies. And I always ended up hating them. Like, I just thought they were really bad. So I would give an honest opinion. So I talked about the Goonies one time, and some dude was pissed off that I didn't like the Goonies.
Yeah.
And
what year are you reviewing these movies? Like, the Goonies is a good 80s movie, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was watching them, and I watched it, a year ago for the first time.
Right. I did the same thing with my kids. I said, "Oh, you got." I can't remember what movie it was. Now I can't remember what it is. But I was talking with Dave Bittner, who does the Cyberwire podcast, which is a good podcast to check out. I'll plug his podcast here.
Yeah, that's fine.
But he was saying that he and his son sat down and watched Caddyshack.
That was one of the movies I did, was Caddyshack, and I hated it. I thought it was awful.
Right?
I did.
But the thing is, when that movie came out, and I saw it for the first time, when did it come out? 1980-something? 1981?
Yeah.
It was one of the first movies we rented with our VHS player. We got a VHS machine, and my dad bought a camera and everything, and it was like, I'm going to make some home movies. And he made a lot of home movies with it. But we went over to the video store and we rented Caddyshack, and I remember laughing so hard at that movie that I was literally on the floor on my knees laughing at the scene where Rodney Dangerfield hits Ted Knight in the groin with a golf ball from uprange, right? I just remember that being so funny, but I watch it with my kids and I'm like, this movie did not age well. Is what I say.
Right.
Spaceballs.
I always say
was another movie.
So I love Spaceballs, and one of the movies I watched for that segment was Blazing Saddles, which I really liked.
Right.
But being the millennial I am, the racism was a little much for me at times.
Well, yeah, there's the whole point of that movie. Somebody says you couldn't make Blazing Saddles today, and the whole point of that movie was to
point it out,
to move the society to a point where you can't make that kind of movie.
Right. There's definitely a lot of movies that you really couldn't make anymore, and I don't get like offended by things. I just, if I like the racism, I didn't like it, but I still enjoyed the movie. It was still funny, and I still laughed at it because you have to understand, you could make those movies back then.
Right. Well,
so
Mel Brooks was making a point with that movie, and
right.
You know who he co-wrote it with was Richard Pryor, and he would the story I heard from Mel Brooks. I don't know where I heard this story, but he was talking about every time he wanted to drop the N-bomb, he would go to Richard Pryor and say, "Hey, do you think it's okay to use it here?" And Richard Pryor would be like, "Yeah, just put it anywhere you want." Right? And he'd go back, "Can I use it here?" And Richard Pryor would be like, "Yeah, Mel, it's fine. Use it there. Use it anywhere you want." And
that's very awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was a lot of classic movies that I didn't like, but there are a lot of classic movies that I do like. I like Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
I think that's a pretty good movie. It is
a good one. Yeah, it still holds up, and maybe it's the fact that I was born in the '90s, so a lot of the movies I've seen now, in the '90s, kind of continued to push those limits that those early '80 movies kind of did.
Right.
So now it's just, maybe I'm just too familiar with it, and I was like, oh, this is nothing new. But at the time, yeah, absolutely, it was something new and different. The viewers like, wow, like I can't believe this happened.
I saw that movie in, I think, the theaters in Laurel, Maryland, back in the '80s when it came out.
And you're still in Maryland right now, right? You still live there?
I am. I've lived all over Maryland, but I've lived in this state all my life.
Awesome.
Never lived anywhere.
What's the beer like over there? What's the craft scene like?
It's actually pretty good. We have a lot of craft beers. We're actually starting to get a lot of craft distilleries, too.
Nice.
Tonight, some of my friends are going over to one that's actually right here in Columbia, which is remarkable that we have a distillery within 10 miles of my house. I mean, that never happened, growing up. I don't
Yeah,
think
that's pretty
there were
convenient.
no distilleries in Maryland. And we have like one of the big, some of the big ones are Flying Dog.
I've heard of that.
Yeah, is a big one. I hate the artwork.
Isn't that the Hunter S. Thompson artist?
Yeah, it's the Gonzo style art, Hunter S. Thompson. That's right. Yeah, it's very and I understand and I appreciate the art. I just hate it. I can look at something and go, yep, I see the artistic talent there. I understand what you're doing there. I just hate that style. It's like ballet. I hate ballet.
Yeah, ballet and also figure skating. I just don't understand.
Oh, I love watching figure skating.
I don't get it.
Know why. I have no idea. I've never liked doing it. I will watch it, and I'm just always amazed at the way these people move so fluidly. And I like watching a lot of dance. I think that's interesting, but I really don't like watching ballet because to me it seems too formulaic and rigid.
Yeah, it's just I always just refer to it as artsy fartsy. It's too artsy fartsy for me. But yeah, I actually have seen Flying Dog in Wisconsin, so I can get it.
Oh, good.
I just have to drive a little bit. There's a place in Madison that sells it, and I was actually in Madison last night, but we didn't stop there. So I'll definitely have to try to swing out and grab some. I know there's one called like Ragin' Bitch or something like that. I think was one of them.
That's an IPA, I think.
I love the IPAs.
Raging, yeah. I do not. I'm not a big fan. No, they have one in wintertime called Horn Dog, which is a barley wine.
Okay.
And that's probably my favorite from them. It's
nice.
It's 9% alcohol though. It's really high ABV. But it's very smooth, very malty, and I like a malty beer.
Yeah. I appreciate all the beers, that I try, and there's only really been one that I didn't really like, and that was the Chinese one. It was just really skunky.
That's probably because it was imported, and it may have gone bad during transit.
Yeah, my friend who spent a good amount of time in China, he lived there for about 4 years. He said it was a million times better when you get it from the source, when you get it.
Yeah, I'm sure it is
domestically. But I'll definitely have to get some of that beer. What other things do you do out in Maryland? How's the weather like there? I don't know. Did you get hit with snowstorm?
We did not. We got, instead of a snowstorm, we got a thunderstorm that woke me up at 3 a.m. I understand. You guys had like 3 feet of snow last weekend or something like that.
Yeah.
It's huge, and buildings were collapsing. Fortunately, nobody was hurt, but it sucked. Like and now it's like outside right now. It's a really nice day. We're gonna get days in the 60s. Yep.
Next week, and it's one weekend we're covered in snow, and the next weekend it's 60 degrees out, and it's flooding the streets. It's really confusing.
That's what's happening here. I'm going to try to build my wife and I would like to build a raised garden bed.
Okay.
So I'm going to be trying to do that this weekend. We're going to call it our salsa garden because we're going to grow all the ingredients for the salsa that my wife makes. We actually learned it from a lady from Mexico who was good enough to teach it to us, and it's really, really good.
I'm a big salsa fan. I'm a big baby though when it comes to like spice and hotness. I always say the only thing I like spicy are my ladies, right?
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I'll tell you this. The about 10 years ago there was all this hot sauce. Maybe it was 15. I'm getting old. It may have been 20 years ago. It was a long time ago, but hot sauces started becoming a thing, right?
Yeah.
And people were like, "Oh, what's this on the Scoville scale? Oh, I like it so much. It's so hot." You don't like that at all, dude.
No.
There's no way you can like this. It just tastes like burning.
I did an episode where I did that one chip challenge. I don't know if you listened to that one.
Oh, that might have been an older one.
It's an older one, an earlier episode.
I'll have to listen to it.
It's have you ever heard of the Pocky one chip challenge?
No.
It's like the Carolina Reaper pepper.
God.
It's dusted on this chip, and me and my friend Joe, we tried it and we did it. We recorded it on the podcast, and I ate it, and it was just awful. It was awful. And I'm like, why would anybody
Nothing but
Why would
pain.
anybody enjoy this? Yeah, and then yeah, you, like you said, you talk about all these people like, oh, I love it when it has 1 million Scoville or whatever. It's like, yeah, nobody does. It's not pleasant.
Right.
It is not pleasant going in. It's not pleasant coming out. It's just a big horror story.
I'd like to just mace them with some pepper spray and say, you like that, don't you? You love
Just
it.
open your mouth. Here's some pepper spray
Right.
for you, bud.
Oh, look how
But-
much he loves it. He's crying. He's so happy.
Cried with joy of how delicious it is. But things Joe hates every week. You release the podcast, and where can people get a hold of you?
Okay, so we release every Monday. So they can find us on our website, thingsjoehates.com. To interact with us, it's best to hook up with us on social media on Facebook facebook.com/thingsjoehates, and follow me on Twitter at thingsjoehates. One more, you can get me an email, and the email address is thingsjoehatespodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, we definitely suggest that they tell you the things that they hate, and you post a week ahead of time what next week's episode is going to be.
That's right. Usually on Wednesday, I post on Facebook and Twitter. I'll tell you next week's episode is going to be about, this coming week is about crappy Jedi mind tricks. I really don't have a way to explain what that is, but just, bad ways of subterfuge. So if anybody
Right.
wants to shoot me an email and let me know what they feel about that, that'd be great.
Awesome, man. Well, and I also appreciate that you post the episodes so early, because I work on third shift, and as soon as midnight hits or kind of a little bit later, there it is. I'm like, all right, time for things Joe hates.
That's right. I'm glad you enjoy the show, Drew.
Yeah, man. Thanks for coming on, and I look forward to interacting a little bit more, and feel free to pop on anytime you can.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, Drew.
Pew pew audio. Goodbye, everyone.